Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning, afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Damien King. I'm the Global Director of Solutions here at Time Doctor. I'm based in Ireland. Where are all you guys today? Feel free to pop that in the chat box. I'm joined here by my colleague, Liam Martin. Liam.
Hi, Damien, and thank you very much, Hester, for the intro. I am Liam Martin. I'm on planet Earth right now. I'm actually in my closet, which I've turned into my office. And it was funny that Hester is actually from PEI, which is Prince Edward Island, which is a very, very small island and one of, I think it is the smallest province in Canada, but I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And we're going to be talking today about retention success, which I think is something that probably every single one of you right now are, if it's not your primary concern, it's absolutely one of your top three concerns. And I think it is probably one of those things that is timeless, right? It's like if it's an HR professional is really focused on retention. If they're not focused on retention, then they're probably not an HR professional for that long. And we have a little bit of experience kind of connected to that. Personally, myself, I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and co-founder of Time Doctor. Time Doctor is a company that has operated remotely for almost 20 years now. We have team members in 56 different countries all over the world. I think it's 56, Damien. Might be 54. We probably have to ask Vinny,
Yes.
who's our HR director, for the exact number. And so through that time, we've been really great at understanding where people spend their time and how they want to do that effect or how they want to be able to deploy their time effectively. And such a core piece of that is retention, being able to make sure that people spend their time where they want to spend it. So agenda, we're actually going to be talking about something that I think is quite possibly going to be a little bit divisive, to be completely honest with you, throughout this presentation. Damien, I don't know whether or not there's some slides here as me and Damien were going through it yesterday, because Damien, you used to work at which company?
Indeed.
Indeed, right?
Yeah.
And so I was throwing some of these slides over to Damien, and he was like, those are probably not a good slide to have for HR professionals. Like, I think that that's going to be a little bit spicy, but I thought to keep it in because what we're really doing is really showing where I think HR is going as opposed to where it currently is today. Damien, I forgot that this is actually your slide. Why don't you go through all the points here?
All good, all good. Thank you for that, Liam. So yeah, guys, we have a packed agenda today. So again, I really appreciate you guys joining. I know it's taking a lot out of your day, so yeah, much appreciated. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by setting the stage. Okay, so we're going to explain a little bit more about who Time Doctor is and what we do. Okay, then we're going to focus on some of the traditional versus AI-driven retention strategies. A lot of the traditional ones you guys will be very familiar with. Maybe some of the newer ones that you won't know about or that you probably don't utilize yet, we can cover on the AI retention. Also, how to identify early warning signs of turnover. This is going to be a crucial piece that Liam is going to bring you through. Strengthening workplace culture with data. We're going to have real world examples of companies that have utilized Time Doctor in order to facilitate that. So that's going to be really good. Also, practical steps that you can take now, right? So how to utilize Time Doctor's data to facilitate better retention rates. And then finally, if time permits, we're going to have our Q&A. But I don't want this to just be a one-stage Q&A. Let's keep this interactive. If you have feedback, questions of any sort, pop it in the chat box. Let's keep it interactive. Let's keep it light as we go through. So next slide, please, Liam.
Oh, hold on one second. There we go.
Cool. So who we are, okay? So before we begin, before we get started into it, let me just lay the groundwork. Let me introduce Time Doctor. So we are a leading workforce analytics platform founded in 2011, as Liam just said, designed to provide organizations with real-time actionable insights into employee productivity and engagement. We have over 245,000 users across 12,000 plus companies, from everything from your smallest SMB through mid-market all the way through to the largest of global enterprises across 76 countries. So we enable businesses to be able to optimize performance, enhance employee satisfaction, and also improve retention through data-driven decision making. So if we go to the next slide, please, Liam. So that's who we are. Then what is Time Doctor? Okay, so Time Doctor is a workforce productivity and time tracking software, primarily designed to help businesses monitor employee work habits, improve efficiency, and streamline things like payroll, for example. So it provides features such as automated time tracking, website and application usage monitoring, productivity analytics, unusual activity, as well as detailed reports. So how does this work for HR teams, right? HR teams and HR professionals can use Time Doctor to ensure accountability, optimize workforce performance, and support remote or hybrid work models by gaining insights into how employees spend their time. It also integrates with various project management and payroll tools, making it a hugely valuable solution for workforce management. So on to our next. So look, these stats here, the exact impact is going to depend on your organization, okay? But the data that we have can deliver these following results, okay? So why is it important, okay? It's hugely important to be able to have a clearer picture on where the bottlenecks and time sucks exist within your organization. That is going to lead to better results across the board. So for example, productivity increases, right? So what we see across the board, up 22% improvement in employee productivity by reducing the time spent on non-work activities. Time savings, okay? So companies can save between 10 and 15% of total work hours by identifying where the inefficiencies and distractions are. As you guys will probably be acutely aware, right? So if you have a typical working week, how much of that do you spend actually doing the work that you're meant to be doing, or are you being pulled in a million different directions, internal meetings for meetings' sakes, things like that? Without having that, hard data from Time Doctor, it's very difficult to try and be able to determine what is a good use of your time versus what is, or potentially, a waste of time. Another one, payroll accuracy. Businesses can reduce payroll errors by between 5 and 10% through precise time tracking and automated reporting. And then another crucial one is project efficiency. Okay, so teams that are working on specific projects, either for clients, etc., they can complete projects up to 20% faster by optimizing the time allocation and workload distribution. And this can be done through the data that Time Doctor provides. So on to the next slide, please, Liam. So we here at Time Doctor, we firmly believe that remote work is here to stay. Okay, but for more on that hypothesis, I will pass you over to my colleague, Liam.
Thanks a lot, Damien. One other thing I wanted to mention as well is whether you use Time Doctor or don't use Time Doctor, what we're about to present to you today is going to be incredibly valued for you as an HR professional. We're really understanding kind of the new era of HR, which is AI driven. And regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with AI, it's coming. And I told this to Damien a couple of weeks ago, which is like, AI will not replace you. Someone using AI will replace you. And you need to be mindful of that and recognize where we're going as an industry. Also, at the end of this presentation, if you watch it all the way to the end, you'll also be able to get access or get a free copy of our Wall Street Journal bestselling book, Running Remote. We wrote that during the pandemic when everyone and their dog wanted to know about remote work. And we had HarperCollins that reached out to us and wanted us to be able to write this. And it's now the second best sold book on remote work. If anyone knows what the number one is, put it down in the chat, and I'll give you 2 books. Or actually, you know what? I'll give you the best-selling book as well, if you know what that is. So, just to kind of give everyone a context of what's going on right here, remote work has had a huge shift in the last 5 years, and we've been doing this for 20 years. So, it's definitely been exciting the last 5. But in the last year or two, we've seen a lot of what I would call like pretty negative news towards remote work. Why a recession in 2023 could see remote workers back to the office, ready to get back to the office from the Globe and Mail. Apple Insider, Apple eases COVID-19 policies to encourage return to the office. Salesforce orders some workers back to the office as growth slows. So everyone should be going back to the office, right? And when I speak at presentations, one of the biggest questions that I get from HR professionals is, how do I have a smooth transition back to the office? And then I ask them, well, why are you going back to the office? And it's generally because the CEO, the CFO, or the COO is basically saying we need to be able to get back to the office. But here's the real reality of this situation is those levels have actually really not moved in the last few years. And I have a lot of data to be able to back this up. But before I get into that, I really want to talk about the elephant in the room that you're probably listening to in the last couple days about remote work. This is probably the biggest reason why there is this pushback to the office.
It's a productivity issue, but it's also a moral issue. People should get off the moral high horse with the work from home because they're asking everyone else to not work from home while they do.
That's Elon. Love him or hate him. In my opinion, Elon is totally wrong on this one. Remote work has never been better for workers, and I have a lot of data to be able to back that up. So this is two data sets, the WSAA and the CHPS surveys. It's actually by my buddy Nick Bloom, who is going to be speaking at our conference end of April. He's the preeminent academic on remote work from Stanford. And right about here, that was pre-COVID, and approximately 4.5% of the US workforce was working remotely. 1 month later, we jumped to 61% of the US workforce working remotely. That is the biggest shift in work since the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution took about 80 years, and we did that in March. It actually, and March to the month, March 15th was when everything shut down. So we saw a massive shift that completely changed the way that human resources operates, reacts. And when you look at this other big, long data set, this big one, you'll see this isn't weeks, this isn't months, this isn't quarters, this is years. Remote work has been flat to stable this entire time. These are the two biggest data sets on this. So Amazon ordering everyone back to work, nothing changed. Apple getting people to go back to work. All of Salesforce getting everyone to go back to work has not impacted this at all. We have a lot of data that can basically allude to this. But one other data set that I wanted to show you is this is the Castle Systems Back to Work Barometer. And the reason why I show everyone this data set is because it's actually a commercial real estate think tank. So it's specifically geared and biased towards getting people back into an office. And the way that they measure things is very interesting. They measure public transportation and key fob entry access. So basically badging into work, opening up that electric door to be able to get in to your office. And they have seen about a 50% drop from pre-COVID levels. So about 50% of your office space is not being used in comparison to pre-COVID. So whether it's 30% or 50%, because a lot of that 30% in the SWAA is actually data that is not necessary, that is self-reported by the employer. And there's a whole bunch of employees that say they're in the office, but they're actually not. And so this basically results in a big problem for you as an HR professional, because you have to measure two big issues here. All of your employees want to be able to go back to the office, but management wants everyone, or all of your employees want to stay remote, but management wants you to be able to get everyone back inside of the office. So you have to figure out a middle ground of how to be able to navigate that. And we're going to be talking about that today. But first, we have a poll question here. I think, Damien, you're taking this one over. And I think Hester's helping out as well. Oh, and there we go. It popped right up.
There we go. So first poll question. There will be a couple of these here throughout the session. I encourage you all to participate. Tell us about your biggest challenge when it comes to employee retention. Also, if it's not on this list or if it doesn't match exactly, please put something in the chat, okay? These responses, they're going to highlight key pain points for you as HR leaders. And yeah, throughout the session, we're going to examine how workforce analytics can address a lot of these challenges and drive meaningful improvements in retention.
So biggest impact on retention: high turnover, low employee engagement, lack of visibility into workforce data, difficulty in getting leaders to support for retention. which one is it? Okay, here we go. We've got it. So it looks like number one is difficulty in getting leadership support for retention efforts such as career growth programs and flexible work policies. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Then we've got high turnover, low employee engagement, and lack of visibility into workforce data. Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Let's get on to the next one here. So right now, as we're speaking, here's the reality. Okay, half your employees might be considering a new job. And I'm sure probably a lot of you are quite surprised by that. You're not alone. The data is very clear, and it's actually gotten a lot clearer now that we have technology like Time Doctor to be able to analyze that in different ways. But here's the real shocker. Replacing just one employee doesn't just cost you their salary, it can easily cost 1.5 to 2 times that amount when you factor in lost productivity, onboarding, training, and the moral impact on your remaining team. And here's the blind spot that I don't think a lot of HR professionals really recognize. Traditional retention strategies, bonuses, perks, pizza parties. Pizzas are horrible, by the way. Please, HR professionals, improve your pizza. They simply aren't cutting it anymore. Why? Because they rarely address the real reason people actually leave their job. And we have a lot of data to be able to back that up. So today, I want to be able to talk about a smarter approach using AI, not just to predict who's leaving, but to understand why they're leaving and what you can actually do about it.
Cool. Now, let's just caveat that. Whilst we are going to talk about new strategies, we are not advocating a complete and utter sea change away from these traditional retention strategies that you will all be acutely aware of as HR professionals. But the point being is that they can sometimes be limited, right? So many organizations, they rely on traditional retention methods, right? Such as, let's say, for example, exit interviews, employee satisfaction surveys, pulse surveys, adjustments to compensation and benefits, like Liam just said. And look, while these strategies do offer value, there's no doubt, they are largely or can be largely reactive rather than being proactive. Okay. So by the time signs of disengagement are identified, the employee may have already made that decision to leave. Okay. So it's very hard to try and change that once that mindset has been created. But they're also ever changing, right? These things fluctuate, they go up and down as people's needs change, right? So prime example of that is compensation and benefits, right? So what does that cover, right? So you need to ensure market competitive pay. That's always going to change depending on what the market is, right? So employees will compare externally on things like Glassdoor, et cetera, to make sure that they feel like they're getting paid what they should be. Ensuring regular internal salary benchmarking as well within your organization to remain equitable and to remain fair and equal across the board. A comprehensive benefits package as well. This is absolutely huge. Healthcare, retirement, wellness perks, things that Liam just mentioned, like pizza parties, U-days, etc. Even those have changed drastically over the last 5 years, right? To give you an idea, where Liam mentioned that I previously worked, that indeed there was this. They constantly conduct studies, and one of the studies that was conducted pre-pandemic showed that the number one benefit that employees wanted to see in the last few years prior to the pandemic, number one was always pay. It was like that was their main focus. Post pandemic, that shift was absolutely massive. Okay, so that from going from pay being the number one pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, the number one thing that employees wanted as a benefit was flexibility. Flexibility in their location. So whether that be hybrid or remote offerings, even before pay. So there was a huge turn, right? And that happened during the pandemic. So that's the traditional. They are the traditional retention strategies. Liam, over to you. What about the newer strategies available?
So we talked about traditional ENPS surveys, exit surveys. I don't know if any of you guys agree with me on this one, but I think the exit survey or the exit interview is probably the interview where there is the least truth of any interview in the history of business. You know, the HR professional is like, okay, let's just kind of get this over with. And the employee is also saying, I just want to get this over with as well. Or they're the 10% of people that will overshare the truth with you and will just start yelling at you for 60 minutes. I've been in both of those types of meetings, and neither of them are that fun. But that's why we have AI-driven strategies, which I think is where we're seeing this new evolution occur. So Damien talked about switching from reactive to proactive employee retention. That's fundamentally what we're talking about here, okay? Identifying patterns that humans might miss and then using data analytics for precise targeted retention efforts. And we're going to be talking about this a lot, but my philosophy is it's more like a spear fishing versus a net fishing type of issue, right? It's like bringing up average pay for everyone is going to be an effective strategy, but it may not be the most effective strategy because maybe 10% of your workforce actually wants to focus on more flexible options, whereas another 20% want higher pay. And then maybe another 30% want better benefits, as an example. You don't really know. And if you just apply a singular kind of methodology across everything, that's being reactive as opposed to proactive. Analyzing retention risks before employees quit is really important. So turnover forecasting, which we have looked at this entire industry, and it essentially, I think probably post where we're at right now, there's going to be a massive change in retention strategy because really being able to use AI to predict turnover is the most important piece of technology that I think any single HR professional can have. I'm a little bit biased because we own some of that HR technology, but regardless. And then understanding why people actually want to leave. So using AI to uncover hidden drivers behind employee dissatisfaction. That's a really important piece of information for you to understand. And just detecting subtle trends like workload issues, managerial relationships, career stagnation, understanding these broader themes rather than actually focusing on isolated complaints is so important to be able to figure out why people want to actually leave their jobs and specifically attuning a solution for an individual user. And then lastly, just focusing on the differentiation between frustrations and serious intention to quit. So there are a lot of employees that you've probably seen or interacted with these people inside of your organizations that talk a lot, but don't really deliver. They're very, very frustrated with their jobs. Maybe they're talking to you every single day and they're sucking up 80% of the oxygen in the room for you as an HR professional, but they don't actually want to quit. And they're just very frustrated. And so by using AI, you can actually figure out who are the people that are the talkers versus the people that are serious about it. And again, if you have any questions on this stuff, please put it down in the Q&A and we'll be able to answer it at the end of this presentation. We don't have the Q&A documentation right up in front of us. So please put down your questions so that in the Q&A time, we can go through with this or we can answer them all. And I think we've got another poll question.
We do, yes. This is our second poll. So here it is in front of you. Does your company currently use workforce analytics to track retention risks? Yes, we actively track data somewhat, but not consistently. No, we rely on manager feedback or not sure. Again, if there's something else additional context you want to provide, please do so in the chat box. Okay.
What do you think the results will be, Damien?
Oh, I'm thinking somewhat, but not consistently. Consistently. That's my bet.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
No, we rely. Wow, 49%. We rely on manager feedback.
Okay.
That's mind blowing.
Yeah. So it's largely manual then, yeah.
Yeah. So there are some other data sets that we know of. There's two major ones, which is at least in Fortune 500, the average is 76% of organizations are using some form of workforce analytics to be able to track this type of risk. That's for Fortune 500. Obviously, for your SMB and your small to medium enterprise, it's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But again, this is the kind of stuff that's coming down the pipe. And at least inside of Time Doctor, we want to be able to serve not just the massive corporations, but we want to be able to empower everyone in the HR world to be able to have access to this. So what is workforce analytics? Probably we should have introed with this particular slide, Damien, but regardless, it's here. So in our opinion, workforce analytics empowers companies to measure knowledge workers' output, to predict outcomes and increase productivity. So regardless of whether or not you're in an office, you're remote or you're hybrid, it doesn't really matter. It allows you to be able to create the predictive outcomes that you need, or identify the predictive outcomes you need to be able to increase productivity. And a big part of that is reducing retention. Probably the biggest part of it, to be completely honest with you. But regardless, we're going to get into that. So how do you actually do this? What's the process for modeling? And the big elephant in the room here is that we have hundreds of thousands of users that log in every single day to give us insights into everything from retention to burnout. Everything inside of Time Doctor, we're measuring that data. And so we are collecting that information anonymously, and then we're deploying that inside of our retention algorithm, which includes almost 11,000 individual variables for context. So you start with a hypothesis, which is something like, we think that burnout is related to you quitting your job, as an example, which is a pretty obvious hypothesis. Then we actually identify the measurable indicators that actually create that particular variable. So responding to emails outside of regular work hours could be a variable or an indicator of that. Then we take all those variables and we measure this concretely, tracking exactly how much time an employee spends on email after 6 p.m. over a month, as an example. And this then goes to the validation and AI insight part, where you are finally basically at a point where we use AI to measure historical data from hundreds of thousands of employees who stayed or quit, and the algorithm determines whether working late significantly predicts turnover while adjusting for other relevant factors. This way, we're not just guessing. Our AI actually pinpoints exactly who's at risk and why, so you can act proactively. And this is an actual snippet. A lot of people ask me, like, isn't this just magic, Liam? And they want to explain it. And then when I get into the weeds of explaining it, we just end up spending 3 hours me nerding out on Bayesian algorithms and how they work. And so my now response that I think Damien uses is, it's magic, and you just have to trust us. But this is one example of the way that our Bayesian algorithm works for machine learning, to be able to actually identify whether or not working on Friday evenings is actually a negative or positive corollary towards someone wanting to quit their job. And we have over 11,000 of these variables that we've tracked individually that all stack on top of each other to be able to produce this type of output. Couple factors relating to quick prediction. So this is our algorithm that we have. So if you're using Time Doctor for retention, this is the way that our algorithm works. And we have variables like work involvement, work outside of regular hours. This green section here that's really big is company culture. So company culture accounts for about 25% of the reason why people want to quit their jobs, which if you're HR professionals, you probably know. But if you are the CEO of the company, you may not understand that as well as the HR professional. But this technology will allow a CEO or an executive to get access to that information directly, which I think is so important. And it's amazing the type of stuff that we show to customers, because then the CEO gets it and is like, oh, of course, this is why people are leaving. It's because of this particular cultural issue that we need to address. And if we can fix this one cultural issue, then our retention will go up by 10 to 20%. Got another poll, and this one I think is a spicy one.
Yeah.
Esther, if you can throw that out one.
That's it. Well, so which workforce analytics feature would be most valuable to your team? So turnover prediction insights, productivity and engagement trends, sentiment analysis and employee feedback tools, or finally real-time visibility into workload balance. Again, as always, is there something in this poll that you don't feel covers exactly what you think would be most valuable? Feel free to put it in the chat box.
And also too, we do all of these things, but it's quite interesting for us to be able to see where the lay of the land is.
And what's your prediction here, Liam?
Boy, I think turnover prediction is really the biggest one. I don't want to bias anybody with that decision, but that seems like the one that I see the most.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll find out in about 10 seconds.
Ooh.
Oh, interesting. All right. So productivity and engagement trends, that's 45%, which is very interesting. Turnover prediction being the second one, real-time visibility into workload balance, and then sentiment analysis of employee feedback tools. Very interesting. So thankfully, we do all of those things. So you're in the right room. All right, let's get into the next one here. So here's the first one. And I think that this one is really fun because to me, it really reinforces some interesting perspectives towards where we're going from a HR cultural perspective. And essentially, what we analyzed is the concept of overwork and burnout. Overwork connected to burnout, and identified that there is people working overtime Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we figured out that that was one of the most important variables towards whether or not someone quit their job. I think it was like the second most important variable outside of more money, which is not a variable that we can really measure effectively. And so for that variable, we identified one key component, which was different from everyone else. There is 1 day per week that if you have your employees work overtime, it is going to basically account for 52% of their frustrations towards overwork. So there's 1 day per week that accounts for 52% of people's frustrations towards working overtime. I'd love to see in the chat, which day do you think it is? You know, a lot of people might think Saturday, maybe they think Friday, maybe Sunday.
I mean, I haven't seen this yet. I would go with Sunday. Honestly,
You'd go with Sunday. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna go with.
You're absolutely and completely wrong, Damien. It's Friday night. So not only did we get it, like it's not just Friday, it's Friday night. And so here, as an HR professional, and you've got your executives inside of the organization that are overworking your team, protect Friday nights at all costs. That accounts for 52% of why they're frustrated about overwork. So if you have to put people in on a Friday night to be able to do another shift or to finish something off, do not do it on a Friday night. Have them come in on Saturday. That is less stressful than if they continued to work on a Friday night. And we've been looking at this data. We have hundreds of thousands of data points kind of essentially connected to this. So we're quite sure that this makes sense. And when you think about it theoretically, it does make sense. A lot of people just want to kind of relax on a Friday night. They want to it feels like the beginning of their weekend. So even if they have to come back into the office on a Sunday, they just feel like that Friday night to Saturday is a good feedback loop for them. And this is also based off of North American data as well, because different countries have different kind of perspectives towards which days they take off. Okay, next one.
You're telling me I can just finish early on a Friday? That's what we're getting at here.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you recognize this, Damien, but we tell everybody internally in our company to actually kick off a little bit early on Fridays. Because we know that makes everyone happy, right? It's like make the time up somewhere else, but leave. Just stop working. Walk away from your computer an hour or two early. That is the best singular thing. When you think about it, taking Friday evenings or Friday afternoons, if you can give your employees Friday afternoons off, that's better than probably a 10% pay bump. Going back to your point, Damien, about flexibility. Right? Yeah. If people can kind of go out Friday night, go out for a drink, have fun, they're going to keep that way more than whether or not I make 10% more on my paycheck, which is very cool. And we have a real world example to be able to back this up. So very quickly, this is our algorithm for Time Doctor in November of 2023 or 2024, I believe. So you can see variables here like lack of consistent work hours, work late in the evening, working early in the morning. We have a lot of newcomer employees inside of our organization, so they naturally have a much higher quit rate than tenured employees inside of the organization. So this is our general data, right, of why people want to quit inside of Time Doctor. We realized we should take our own data, throw out our dirty laundry for everybody to be able to see. We had this employee that on November 6th, they had a 33% chance of quitting. And by November 9th, they had a 52% chance of quitting. It's a pretty big jump, basically almost a doubling of their chance of quitting within a 4-day period. And everything that you're seeing here, the algorithm saw, but we didn't understand the human dynamics that occurred to explain why this thing particularly occurred. So this is Time Doctor's data. This is why people quit inside of Time Doctor. And this is that individual employee. And you can see that work late in the evening is like a flashing red light. Work late in the evening was a flashing red light saying, this person is going to quit because they're working late at night. And so we actually had a chat on November the 7th. Remember, the numbers on November 6th, November 7th were boosting up. And we had already seen this chat that we pulled between two of their managers, of this employee's managers, talking about the stress that this particular employee was experiencing. And we actually found out that one of their coworkers had quit. And this other employee was taking on that other person's workload and was very stressed out about it and was overworked. So on November 13th, it's really important to keep that into consideration. We sent an email, manager sent an email saying, hey, stop working overtime. We're going to backfill the position as soon as possible. Right now, we're actually going to pull someone from another department to come and help you on this problem. And you need to bring this up more often as soon as possible inside of your meetings that you have with your manager. So he emails back saying on the same day saying, thank you very much appreciative of this. And yes, I was stressed out and I will make sure that I speak up more often. So we sent this email on November the 13th, right? And then you can see on November 14th, we went from a 46% chance of quitting down to a 23% chance of quitting, which was below his background radiation level. So this is what is so exciting is for the first time ever, you can actually measure an individual's retention chances as opposed to looking at it organizationally. And so that's the beauty of where we're at right now. And our technology knew nothing about this email, knew nothing about this Slack exchange that the managers had. It just understood all of those variables, those 11,000 variables that we talked about, and can identify whether or not someone is stressed out with their job. Let's go on to the next poll question here. And again, if you have any questions about that, put it down in the chat. I'm happy to answer them in the Q&A.
Nice, Liam. So this is our final poll of the session. So what is your biggest challenge in balancing productivity and engagement? So avoiding micromanagement, improving transparency and trust, or finally keeping remote employees engaged. Like always, if you need to add anything else, please go right ahead in the chat box.
Mine's definitely keeping employees engaged.
Yeah, keeping remote employees engaged, I think, especially.
I don't have it in front of me, but I don't know, Damien, do you join the Oculus Rift parties where we all put in headsets?
I don't actually know.
If you don't have one, you can have one. The company issues you a VR headset and you can play games with us if you want.
Oh, nice. I'll take you.
Improving transparency and trust. Great. And then almost a tie, keeping remote employees engaged and avoiding micromanagement. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the next one, which I think is it's definitely one that for me is just talking about that engagement issue that we were talking about before. Measuring engagement is only half the battle. Here's the reality is if engagement shifts to another application, it means that someone wants to quit their job. So let's say that my most used applications are Slack, email, and Zoom. Those are the 3 most used applications that I have. So if that engagement switches to another application, it actually is a huge indicator that someone wants to be able to quit their job. I think it's like in the top 5. And we don't honestly know why this happens, but we know that it's a very reliable indicator that someone wants to be able to quit their job. If anyone has an idea or theory about that, please put it down in the chat. Our best theory is that employees are getting distracted or they're starting to become disengaged from what they're doing. And they're just saying, I don't want to deal with maybe, the workload that I currently have. Maybe I've got some stressors outside of work that are impacting my productivity inside of the organization. And so that's one that I found incredibly interesting. And it's very difficult for us to be able to get the actual interviewing done because we're only looking at the data from an anonymized perspective. We don't know who it is, but we know that the data is very clear that this is one of the biggest factors connected to people wanting to quit. So for most people, that is their most used application, and their third most used application is something like a CRM or video editing tool. Usually if that third most used application, like there's a communication application, basically your top most used applications are communication, email, Slack for us, video conferencing, that kind of a thing. But their third most used application is usually what they do their work on. So if it's like for a salesperson, that would be a CRM as an example. So if there's movement from that CRM, it's going to significantly impact their chance of quitting. Here's another one. Boredom leads to quits a lot. And this was another surprising one for me. Boredom is actually a leading indicator that your people might actually quit. And it's, I don't know, Damien, if you thought that boredom could be theoretically so dangerous, but it is one of the most important variables towards whether or not someone wants to quit their job.
Yeah, I think so. If you're feeling unchallenged, right? So if you're becoming bored in what you're doing day to day, yeah, I can totally see that. It's a
Yeah.
huge factor.
So boredom is what I like to call the silent killer for employee retention. And again, like, you're probably thinking to yourself as an HR professional, what do you mean? How the heck am I supposed to measure boredom? Let me tell you, because we can measure that now. First, a spike in calendar use. Okay, basically employees checking schedules obsessively to fill time. Big indicator of whether or not they're bored. Second, reduced interactions with their core productivity apps, which I talked about before. Okay, they're here, but they've essentially just checked out. So they're going through the motions, they're at work, but they're not actually actively using those applications. Third, more frequent breaks. So employees stepping away because they're disengaged, they're not necessarily refreshed. That's another big indicator that you can measure. And finally, and this is the big one, lots of idle time in their most used applications. So essentially they're present, but they're not actually active. And that sounds bad, but here's the good news, okay? These signs give you a chance to step in early to re-engage your people and turn boredom back into productivity before it's too late. So the biggest one that we found right now is stepping in, speaking with that HR professional or that employee as the HR professional, or even just working with with that manager and coaching them and saying, does this person want to move to another department? Do they want a new challenge? Do they want to be able to do something new inside of the organization? This is where you can really re-engage that team member, because that boredom lasts for about 3 months and then they start looking for another job. So you have that in-between space to be able to save that person and retain them by actually identifying boredom before it presents in other ways, which are much more destructive towards your organization. And next one here, some overwork. This is the one that I told Damien about, and he was like, this is going to be problematic. But
this is fascinating to me.
Yeah. So here's the deal. It's going to make you, probably a couple of you, pretty angry. And if it is, put it down in the chat. Tell me off. I'm happy to hear that. Here it is. Okay. A little bit of overwork under certain circumstances can actually lower your turnover risk. I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but it's not as simple as pushing people harder. That really doesn't work. Let me explain, okay? So What our AI discovered is that consistency matters more than the exact number of hours worked. So employees who keep consistent schedules, especially those who start their days early. So this is something else that I was telling Damien, that he was like, oh, I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good idea, but checking emails before 9 a.m. basically is one of the biggest indicators that someone will stay inside of a company. And that sounds really weird and odd, but it is true. They tend to feel more engaged, committed, and satisfied in their particular roles. And in fact, employees who regularly worked slightly longer days, like 10 hours consistently per day compared to a standard 8 hours, were notably less likely to quit. But remember, the key factor isn't working people harder, it's providing a stable, predictable routine where employees clearly feel dedicated and connected to their job. So if you're looking to boost retention, think less about exact hours and more about helping your team find consistency, predictability, and genuine purpose in their daily work. And this is something else that we've done a lot of theoretical kind of processing on our own connected to this. Our belief is that if someone works 10 hours per week, they're really passionate about the position and they're engaged. If anyone understands the philosophy of getting inside of the zone, right? Deep work, the work that everyone just loves doing and they get into this nice flow, that's the type of work that you want to be able to optimize all of your team members inside of. And if you don't have that, people will generally quit. But those team members that are so focused and engaged don't stop that under any circumstances whatsoever. Even if they're working a little too much, it's actually kind of good for their overall productivity. Newer tech has huge impact on quit chances as well. And we rebuilt our AI algorithm each month. So every single month we rebuild the algorithm just to be able to see, are there new websites and applications that are impacting the chances of someone basically quitting their job. And we recently found a variable that has now risen to the 8th most important factor towards whether you're actually going to quit. Damien, what do you think that is? It is the 8th most important factor towards whether or not someone will quit their job. And it's just a simple category of applications. And again, please let me know down in the chat. If you guess correctly, you get a free book. Maybe. Absolutely.
I think I know what it is, but yeah, I won't give it away because I want to allow people the chance to win a free book.
Okay. All right. So if a worker starts using a large language model like ChatGPT in their job and stops, it's one of the most important indicators that somebody will quit their job. And so we've been thinking about this quite a bit and we didn't really understand it. And our theory is that someone has learned these new large language model tech stacks like ChatGPT, they start using it. And then if they stop, that's a huge red flag they're going to quit. And what we think is happening is probably they've retrained themselves. They've trained themselves on how to actually be a more effective worker. And they're looking to probably go work somewhere else for more money, right? So what you would do as an HR professional is you would see that and you would say, what new challenges are you interested in pursuing? You know, maybe there's something connected to AI that you really want to be able to work on inside of the organization. Let's let you do it. Because to me, that is, you're going to be able to retain that person and that person is going to be challenged. Again, I talked about the boredom slide before. And this all kind of just focuses down in to my concept that I've been talking about, which is in traditional HR, retention strategies have been a lot like fishing with a net, right? And you throw something out there, you see what happens, but here's the problem. The employees aren't fish. And that's something else that someone told me about this presentation. And this one size fits all kind of mindset just doesn't cut it anymore fundamentally, right? So our AI-driven retention tool, it changes the approach entirely. Think of it as more like spear fishing. So instead of treating everyone the same, it allows you to actually precisely identify individual employees who are genuinely at risk, and even better, pinpoint exactly what's causing the distress and disengagement, as opposed to just giving everyone a 10% pay rise that's going to help your retention, but it's not going to help in the way it's much more precise to be able to figure out specifically who needs that pay rise and why. So employees stay when they feel understood, supported, and individually valued. And we all know that. If you're an HR professional, you know that. And you need to be able to gain the insights into what is going to basically make them feel individually supported, valued, and understood. And so with targeted insights, you can actually stop guessing about that, and you can start actually focusing on real retainment on an individual basis. It's smarter, more human, and to me, it's where modern HR is moving. But that's just my opinion. Please let me know down below if you completely disagree with this, or if you have any other questions kind of connected to this, because I'm happy to open it up to questions. But before we get into that, Damien, can you show everyone some real world examples of this?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Liam. And yeah, look, really, really good insights. I think what it summarizes is kind of data-driven decision making is really what it comes down to. So all of that is amazing. Excuse me. But what I want to share with you is a real world example, okay, from a client who only joined us last year, okay? And this client, as you can see, global logistics company, not a large client. And this is why I wanted to show this example, because Time Doctor is suitable for companies of all sizes. 300 employees within their office space for focusing on warehousing, global freight management, last mile delivery, etc. So they had a bit of a mix. Some were in office, some were hybrid, okay, some were fully remote. But they came to us with some really big challenges, okay? So the company's leadership, they were starting to notice an imbalance in employee workloads. A lot of this was just anecdotal, very manual, very individual feedback that they were getting. Some employees were consistently overworked, leading to burnout and increased turnover. Okay. Others had uneven workloads, causing inefficiencies and delays. There was no clear visibility into how the work was being distributed across the team. So you could have a similar team performing the same function. You would have one person on the team who was shouldering the burden of the entire workload of the team. Other people doing a lot less work than they should have. Okay. So the employee well-being and retention these were becoming huge concerns. But the problem was leadership had a lack of real data to be able to take action on any of this information. It was, as I said, it was all purely anecdotal when they came to us. Okay, so next slide, please, Liam. So, thank you. So what they did was they implemented Time Doctor. And this is the beauty of Time Doctor. Your time to value is super quick, because once we plug it in and once we start receiving the data, as I said, you can get very, very quick actionable insights, right? So workload analysis and transparency. Okay, so Time Doctor tracked hours worked, task completion times, productivity trends across different teams. So therefore, managers were able to identify employees who were working excessive hours and those with lighter workloads. So they just had a much clearer picture as to what the teams were doing, okay? So then what they could do is they could look to balance those workloads, okay? So using Time Doctor reports, leadership, they redistributed tasks to create a more balanced and equitable workload across the entire team. They also implemented fair shift scheduling to prevent excessive overtime, what we've kind of talked about previously, right? So people working over the hours that they should have been, working evenings, working weekends, okay? So they also then implemented a new policy based on the data that they had to encourage breaks and well-being. So they utilized our Time Doctor's work-life balance tool that we have out of the box to determine how many people were working late hours, outside shift, and weekend work, okay? And what managers did then is they used Time Doctor to ensure that employees weren't exceeding healthy working limit. So that's what they did. They set new working limits, okay? Then remote team optimization. So the people that were working remotely, Time Doctor provided insights into those remote employee workloads, something that they were completely blind to in the past, okay? They knew what the output was, but they didn't know how they got there. So what they could do is they could ensure they had the same work-life balance considerations as in-office employees, right? Making sure that if somebody is working from home, that they are closing their laptop at the time that they should be, okay? All of this possible from Time Doctor. The company introduced flexible scheduling for employees based on workload data. So it improved employee retention and productivity. Employee satisfaction improved as workloads became more manageable. And as you can see from the stats, these are very like eye-watering stats, right? In terms of the uptick and the improvement. After deploying Time Doctor for a very short time, they saw an immediate uptick in employee satisfaction. Overall, and that's one of those traditional methods that we mentioned earlier, determining employee satisfaction through surveys, and an overall increase in retention as they were able to use, and this is crucial, the data that we provided to make informed decisions. So that's a real world example, all of which can be achieved by utilizing Time Doctor out of the box. Over to you, Liam. Sorry.
Sure. So
yeah, cover.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize it was me again. Yeah, so look, key takeaways here. I'm cognizant of time, but proactive retention requires data-driven insights. If you don't have the data, it's very difficult to be able to make those decisions. Key retention risks, as Liam has already explained throughout, can be predicted and mitigated, right? So that's what we want to be able to use Time Doctor for, okay, to figure out on an individual level, not just on a blanket one. So that kind of fishing net versus spear fishing, we can really customize that kind of retention strategy on a per employee basis. And then lastly, workforce analytics, strengthen workplace culture and trust by evening out and making a more equitable workplace.
Totally. I want to also be able to show everybody before we get into Q&A, which I'd love to be able to get into. Hopefully you can all still see my screen and how it's operating. So if anyone wants to be able to meet with Damien and or me and get a free copy of the book, but also as well, get a retention assessment. So we can go in and we can literally tell you all of the data that I just showed you. We can give it to you for free. So you can understand exactly where your business is operating, specifically go into that spear phishing campaign and identify the 10% of employees that actually really do need help, as opposed to the 90% that probably are just running on autopilot. You don't really need to necessarily do anything. So if you go to the book a demo link, which I think we'll include in the chat, if Hester has not put it in, Damien, you pop it into the chat right there. Yeah, you go to this particular page. So everybody, you just go to timedoctor.com/book-demo. So you can just do that in your browser right now. And you just type in your name. My name's Liam Martin. My email address, which is liam@timedoctor.com. I'm Canadian, so I put in my phone number. How many employees in your company? We have about 200 plus. In what country? Where is your company headquartered in? Right. And for us, that is actually the United States, which is all the way at the bottom. And click on that. And then click on this little toggle. And then you just click get a demo. And within, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, Damon will be able to get back to you. And if you also want to be able to chat with me, I'm happy to also jump on as well. We know a lot about remote work, and Don had actually mentioned hybrid. We know a lot about hybrid as well, which is something that really the majority of the market is going into. And we cover that all specifically in this book, Running Remote. So most of the questions that have actually already been kind of popping up in the chat, we have answered the majority of those questions inside of this book. And if you fill out this form, you also get that book just as an extra gift from us. But let's go into Q&A here. Does anyone have any questions? And maybe it's also a little bit difficult for me to be able to see it all because I don't exactly know how this UI works. Damien, are there any questions in there? Oh, and it looks like we're going to get close to a wrap up as well.
Yeah, no, I have one here that we can answer very quickly. Okay, so
perfect.
Can AI be limited to not seeing personal information when we look at analytics? That's from Scott.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Scott, you're absolutely right. There is, number one, all of our data is anonymous. So our algorithm looks at this data anonymously. So we don't know if it's Damien's activity. Like we don't know what activities Damien is actually producing inside of our company. But then you as an HR professional could say like, hey, you know what? It looks like Damien is really stressed out for these particular reasons. But it doesn't actually give you the granular data of it was because he took an extra 3 minutes on his lunch break, as an example, which is not the only factor that kind of connects to this. But it's a whole bunch of connected factors. So the short answer is no, we don't need to see that data. And the long answer is we collect all of that information, but it's anonymized by our algorithm.
Yeah, and just as an addition to that, GDPR, compliance, the whole nine. So it's not something that we can look at an individual if they're into the algorithm. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that is time. We are a minute over.
I think we're getting cut off. Yes, yeah. Really appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, just go click on the link. We can chat with you again. If it's not even happy to take a look at Time Doctor, I think it's a fantastic solution for the vast majority of HR professionals. But if not, we're happy to answer any questions about HR or retention in general.
Thank you all.
I'd like to thank our speakers as well as all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to view this webcast again, the archived recording will be available on the HR.com website within 24 hours. The webcast credit will show in your HR.com account within 2 business days, and we'll also send you an email with your credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new browser page on your computer. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.